All right, good evening and welcome to another edition of our Google Plus Hangout for Channels Beam. Today we're looking at the plan by the federal government to actually get to borrow from an external source the sum of $29.8 billion to fund some projects in the country. Well, joining me today to look at this, first we have Henry Nosagbe. He joins us from Paris in France. Thanks for coming on the program. And we also have Ois Yaya, who joins us from Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory, that's Abuja, in Nigeria. Thanks as well for coming on the program. So let me just start with you, Henry. What do you make of the plan by the federal government to borrow externally at this point in time?
Okay, thank you. Let me start by saying that fiscal challenges that the government of the day has had to go through, starting from the fall in oil prices and the associated fall in government's revenues, there's an obvious need for the government to try to plug in the revenue sources by some kind of borrowing. You could say that there might be a need to borrow, you understand? But of course, there are challenges with regard to public disclosure of the funds are going to be used for, both in terms of the amount, which is 30 billion, which many people, including myself, think is so high, and also in terms of the usage of these funds and how well the government of the day is going to manage the use of those resources in terms of utilization and repayment. So those are the concerns that need to be addressed by the government of the day in terms of utilization of the funds. Sourced, where the money will be deployed, and how the money is going to be repaid. Those are the questions that many Nigerians, including myself, have about the amount that is going to be raised, that the government intends to raise. And we are looking forward to getting more clarification from the government before we can begin to go into deeper analysis. But for now, we don't have much details on this. So for now, we need more information. Let me just leave it at that.
All right, very well. You say we need more information, but then I'll come back to you on that. Let me just get a view or get a sense of what Ois thinks of this plan to borrow from an external source at this point in time. Ois, what do you think about this? Hold on. All right, please go ahead.
Clearly said, the sketchy nature and the lack of information as to the source of these funds, the interest rate, how we are repaying these funds, and what they are meant for is not available to the public. So this, it makes the whole borrowing a little bit, Nigerians are not comfortable with it, if I can say. And also the issue of borrowing, sourcing funds externally, if you look back into our economic history, not just Nigerians, most developing countries in the 1980s, the structural adjustment program that most of these countries adopted and got loans from IMF were not utilized for the purpose that they were meant for. And it has indebted and impoverished these countries continuously. Very recently, about a decade ago, our debts were forgiven. But if you take it from then till now, we are at almost 11 point something billion dollars of debt. And now we want to borrow another $30 billion. So there is a need for the government to clarify on the sources of these funds, how you intend to pay back, what will you utilize these funds for, and the interest rate, which is particularly very important. But the funds are, in my opinion, are very much needed, considering the insufficient revenue to finance the deficit of the budget. There's a recession going on. There's increase in economic inactivity, the demographic factors. If you talk about this whole Niger Delta and the Northwest, we need funds to push in this thing, infrastructure amongst other things. We are generating money now from non-oil sector. There's a need to enhance or facilitate means that we can easily generate these funds and boost up economic activities. But there's also a need for the government to clearly explain to Nigerians how it intends to source these funds and what is the payment plan of these funds.
All right, very well. So both of you seem to agree on the fact that there needs to be more information on how and where this money will be used or sourced for. But then you made mention of Nigeria already generating funds from non-oil sectors. I think that's the issue of diversification of the economy, because that has also been on the table for quite quite a while now. But a lot of people still don't understand, because if you say we're generating revenue from non-oil sources, what are the sources? I mean, people would want to know, because if we're going out to borrow and then, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the main sources of this internally generated revenue, we should give a very big credit to the FIRS, the Nigerian Custom Service also. They contribute a lot to most of these funds. They are mainly internally generated taxes, amongst other means that we generate this money. The nature of where this internally generated money are gotten from other than the oil revenue is not clear-cut, but there is a percentage of between 60 to 65 for the last 2-3 months. We have been generating that amount internally, which is a step in the right direction. And also, I will like to talk more about this whole lending issue. I think most governments lend money for various reasons. Probably one, to cushion the deficit, automatic fiscal stabilizers in times of recession. There's investment also, government borrow for short-term investment. And there's political reasons, which is the most widely acclaimed reason why government borrow. The current government that is heading Nigeria today has promised a lot to Nigerians. And Nigerians have never at any point in time demanded for responsiveness and representation from their governments like they are today. We are very much aware of the need to be represented. So this political pressure to meet up the demands of the Nigerians, I think it is one of the main reasons why they want to borrow this money. Not like we don't need it, we do need it, but the pressure politically, other than the automatic fiscal stabilizers to cushion the recession, it is the main reason. Because if you are borrowing money to cushion a recession, there's a need. The Minister of Finance should clearly go to the House of Assembly and defend this this intention to borrow money. This is where we are sourcing it from. Do with it, but this is sketchy. There is no information about this, and the National Assembly was right to dismiss this notion, in my opinion.
All right, very well. Always, if you would just stay back a bit, you kind of just go back a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, Henry.
Is it okay like this?
Yeah, this is okay. This is okay. All right, Henry. Henry, let me come back to you if you're there. Henry, can you hear me? Hello, Henry, can you hear me? Hello, Henry. Oh, well, it seems Henry is having some issues with his internet. But then a lot of people might not agree with you that there's this form of internally generated revenue, because when you're talking about the diversification of the economy, a lot of people might want to see some form of non-dependence on oil. But then, well, is any of such plans on ground? Maybe agriculture, well, technology. Have you seen any indications as to whether we are moving towards those sectors?
Well, I cannot authoritatively give you an answer that I have seen any of this, but yes, I think we are moving in that direction, because we are clearly not generating this revenue from oil. It means we are generating it internally. And I'm very sure on the Bureau of Statistics, there should be a data on the amount generated from each sector that is being remitted to the government account, because what this administration did, I think they have one general account where all government revenues are being deposited. So there should be like a statistics which the public can go through and scrutinize. I think we can find such information on the Bureau of Statistics website.
All right, let's wait and hope we find out. But then Henry joins us again. Henry, just before you left, we were talking about, Yaya was actually talking about the country generating funds from non-oil sources, and he says also that which is through the IGR. However, I just wanted to ask and find out if you think we are indeed diversifying the economy at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Well, when it comes to diversification, there is rhetoric and then there's results. What we've seen from the government of the day is a lot of rhetoric in terms of we're going to diversify sources of revenue, and we're going to diversify the export base of the country, but we've seen very little, if not, I don't think we've really seen much in that direction. Because we are talking about diversification of the source of government revenue. What we are talking about is increasing the participation of non-oil actors in the economy. So how do you make the business environment, how do you make it suitable for business activity to take place? And then you tie it back to ease of registration of a business, pro-market policies, and make it easier for investors who are foreign to take investment decisions about the economy. And by the time you go into those details, you see that this government is, I have to say, really not serious about these issues. You want to talk about ease of doing business. What specific steps have been taken by the government to enable businesses to register and carry out their activities with minimal interference and with ease, basically? What policy steps are taken by the government to improve the exchange rate predictability in terms of how easily a foreign investor, for instance, can bring in his foreign exchange to the country and take it out if he needs to? By the time you dig deep into those questions, you see that really nothing has been done. Arriving at the diversification the government has been talking about. And you know, it's funny because for the government that says it wants to diversify from oil, it seems to be spending so much of our scarce national resources in drilling and export oil flows to Leka and then so how the government on the one hand they want to diversify your export base and income sources away from oil, at the same time you're investing so much billions of dollars in oil exploration in potentially on oil wells in other parts of the country in the middle of an economic recession. They don't seem to fact out today. So I really don't think the government has been much actual results in this regard. It's no rhetoric so far.
All right, very well. Always, let me come back to you. It seems you were kind of shaking your head or nodding your head. I wasn't really sure, but then, of course, I'm sure that would have been probably in response to some of the things Henry said. Would you like to reply?
Yes, I think in response to the proposed exploration of oil in the northeastern part of the country, I don't know what these measures are intended for. Like he said clearly, if we are actually considering diversification, we shouldn't invest more in oil. But if you take a look at the nature of the demographic of where the oil is being exploited from now, there's a lot of political instability. And I think the government is just scaling up its preferences in terms of cost, which one is more costful, which one is more expensive to us. Should we fight this insurgency or explore this oil in other potential areas? If we can have same amount of oil, why don't we explore in other potential areas rather than continue to fight in this insurgency that doesn't seem to have an end?
All right, very well. Well, we all hope that the insurgency comes to an end. Like you said, it doesn't have an end, but then hopefully we'll see an end to it. Well, Henry, let me come back to you. Earlier we were talking about sectors at which we can actually even look at the diversification process from looking at the agriculture, technology, so to speak. Now, I mean, I think they're the two most talked about sectors that can help Nigeria diversify its economy and to an end stop it from actually borrowing from external sources. Have you seen any indicators as to whether we are moving towards those sectors to diversify? Henry. Henry, can you hear me? Henry, can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay, so I said, I mean, a lot of people are saying that agriculture and technology or information and communications technology, ICT. Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, I hear you now, but the network is just going on. Okay.
All right. Yeah, so we're talking about moving or diversifying from oil to other sectors. And a couple of sectors have been identified, for instance, agriculture and ICT. Do you see any pointers or indicators that says we are indeed moving towards those sectors to diversify? Well, it seems Henry can't really hear us now, but then we also have Ben Cosmos, who joins us from Kuala Lumpur. Ben, welcome on board on the program. So a lot of water has gone down the bridge before you joined, but then so where we are at the moment is we're talking about the diversification of the economy, and a lot of, like I was just saying a few seconds ago, that agriculture and ICT have been identified as sectors to look at in terms of diversifying the economy. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. But let's not also forget about the mining sector. Agriculture and the mining sectors they are also very important. Also in ICT and also in our human capital development. And mining, we shouldn't forget about mining because we have a lot of untapped mineral resources in Nigeria that we really need to work on. In fact, it will be more faster for us to even invest in terms of the mineral resources we have within the southwest and in the middle belt, like places like Jos, Nasarawa State, that has a lot of solid minerals in abundance, and we have not really done anything with those things. They are still there untapped. We need to really have a framework in mind and look at how we can invest in those sectors. I mean, give good license, look at the license, review some of the laws we have in our mining sectors, and allow private companies to invest in some of these mining areas, and we can have a lot more income coming in from there. And agriculture, we can't just overrule it because before our independence, Nigeria has been known for our potentials in agriculture in terms of cocoa farming and cassava and the rest, and other notable cash crops like palm oil and palm fruit and the rest of them. And all of a sudden, since oil came on board, everything has just fallen in place. We really need to go back now that we have good technology in place. We can have palm seed within 24 to 36 months. You begin to harvest them. I mean, it's so awesome now. And if we really look at in those kind of aspects, we will begin to have good yield, good product coming into market, and we will begin to also learn how to practice a 12 months farming, not just the rainy season type of farming. Once it's rainy season, people go back to farm, and once it's dry season, people migrate from the rural area to the urban areas, and this is the kind of situation we find ourselves in. And you know, if you're living in a place like Abuja, Lagos, you experience some of these. Some of these are northerners who, once it's dry season, they all come out to take on manual jobs like Okada driving, pushing keke and the rest of them. Once it's rainy season, they go back to the farm to farm sugarcane and other things. It's because there have been lack of government presence in the kind of business that they are doing. If you actually invest very well in agriculture, in terms of sugarcane farming, in terms of palm front farming, in terms of cocoa, we have a lot of tomatoes and the rest of them. We will be able to produce enough food that we can consume ourselves. Once we are okay with what we consume, we can be able to export. We have a lot of potential agriculture. We have good soil that any seed will work in Nigeria. Good seed are coming up to cassava and wait for 12 months before you harvest. We have better seed which is being used in agriculture. Nice of them, just that we have neglected that sector for so long. We just want quick money that comes from oil. Nobody's really thinking. We have a minister of agriculture who doesn't really know what the current agriculture framework is on board in terms of, if you look at other countries like Australia, you look at countries like India, you look at countries like Malaysia, you see what they have done with their palm front and the rest of them. We are really lacking behind. We need to put up a very good framework, how invest heavily in agriculture, because you cannot get what you have to. You cannot reap what you don't sow. When you invest heavily in agriculture, you will get heavily out of it. In terms of livestock management, what have we been able to do in terms of our poultry farmers? What kind of assistance have we been able to give to them, those who are into poultry farming, into farm cattle rearing and the rest of them? Because agriculture is a very vast is a very large and vast type of business that has so many sectors in it. Once we do this, we'll be able to for our veterinary doctors who are out from school and have nothing to do because they don't have farms to work on. We have a lot of them. They are just is a chain work from the from the day you go to the farm to the production level to the processing is a huge industry that we really need to tap into and create more wealth for the nation at large.
All right, very well, Ben Cosmos. But then Henry, let me again come back to you, if you can hear me, Henry. Henry, can you hear me?
Hey.
Okay, very well. Great, I can hear you now. So, I mean, I think Ben has just given us a little bit of shed a little bit on light on talking about other sectors that we can diversify. But now, some people raise concerns as to the issue of this plan because, I mean, if you know, in the past, most of like Oyi said a decade ago or thereabouts, we got some of our debts cleared from the Paris Club. But then those debts, a lot of people, or we know it's a matter of fact that what those monies were borrowed for were not actually used. Those monies were not used judiciously, and some people are beginning to raise those fears that same thing could happen to this fund. And they also add that to the fact that they're saying that even the budget that we have at the moment, there's no transparency on the use of the funds therein. And they're saying there's no breakdown of funds released for capital projects, like no budget performance reports. Do you share the same view?
Yes, thank you. I do. In fact, the issues behind the last major debt crisis we had, that was, the debts that were paid off during the Obasanjo administration. Those are the kind of things that inform my own personal belief that we should have as minimal government as possible in terms of the economy and in the management of resources. Now, many of the things that the government intends to borrow this money to do, or the projects they intend to execute, are projects that in better organized economies can be carried out by the private sector, to be honest. We don't need to have government invest in a railway or in a pipeline or in any of those infrastructural projects if we had the right policy environment that could attract private sector investment in all of these areas. That's the first point I want to make. And the reason why why in the past we accumulated this huge debts in doing all of these projects is because the government is a poor manager, has always shown itself, at least in this part of the world, to be a poor manager of resources. So you have a situation where the government borrows to construct a dam or borrows to construct a road, spends more than it should on that road, and then at the end of the day, it secures a huge debt burden, and either the project is not executed or part of the money is looted and not utilized properly, and then the government or subsequent governments carry that debt burden and they have to pay it. In a better organized economy where the government has a minimal role and the private sector is encouraged to carry out these projects, you find out that number one is the interest of the private sector operatives to get those projects executed, because that is how they recover the amounts that they have invested in those projects. So for me, the wider issue is how do we get government to reduce its size and allow more efficient operators to execute the capital projects that the government is borrowing for. If that happens, then we don't need to borrow the quantum amounts that the government is intending to borrow. And that is how, ideologically speaking, I think the conversation should go in the long term. But given that we are not at that stage yet, what we need to do is, first and foremost, we need the government to explain to us what its overall strategy is to get us out of the recession. We need to know what reforms are being made in terms of curtailing wasteful government spending, because those things are not happening at this point in time. Because, I mean, how do you justify going to borrow those huge amounts if the amounts you're currently spending on recurrent expenditure I mean, take a look at the 2016 budget. There are a lot of questionable items there in terms of what's the relevance, of what you're spending on certain wasteful items. So those are the foundational issues that I think the government should take into account. And I want to make a quick comment about the point that was made about agriculture. I think before we can really begin to talk about how to revolutionize the agricultural sector, we need to talk about the Land Use Act and how much of a stumbling block the Land Use Act is in revolutionizing the agricultural sector. I want to talk about it from the perspective of ownership of land, for example, whereas in other serious countries you have private ownership of land where you don't need to go through the entire process of obtaining governor's consent before you can transfer property from one person to the other. In Nigeria, ownership and management of land is in the hands of the government, and at best you can only hold land for a 99-year lease. That in itself is a disincentive for private sector investment, because a private sector operator who wants to invest in large-scale farming projects will always have to factor in the risk that his land can be taken and expropriated by any government agency at any point in time making use of the Land Use Act. So the first thing we need to do, get rid of the Land Use Act, have a land use system that confers proper private ownership of land in the hands of private individuals and guarantees private property rights. When that is done, then we can begin to talk about how to incentivize investment in the agricultural sector, how to help farmers become large-scale landowners, for instance. Those conversations can follow from the reform of the management of our land use system, which has to follow from the Land Use Act. That's the little point I wanted to make in regard to that.
All right, very well, Henry. Yeah, let me also come to you to get your own comments on the issue of previous debts that were collected, and also as to how this one might be used judiciously or not, and also the way the details of the budget has with the Nigerian public. What do you make of it, Justin, rounding up now?
Well, as regards the budget, clearly some months back, the finance minister did come out and explain that the budget items on the budget are going to be given priorities. Not necessarily, the government is not necessarily going to finance all the proposals on the budget or the policies because it doesn't have the money to finance this. And as regards transparency of this nature of this loan, regardless of whether we are borrowing it to invest in a private, in agriculture or infrastructure, these loans are usually accompanied by stringent conditions like job cuts, retrenchment, among other factors. And there's a need also to clearly explain to Nigerians the sources, like I earlier stated, and how it is intended to be utilized. While this loan can infuse economic growth, it can also set us back economically, because this debt is not necessarily going to be paid by the government of the day. It may be paid 100 years later. So we don't know the nature of this debt and the source of it. There's a need for the government to explain to Nigeria. But do we need this money in this economy? Yes, we do need it. There's just a need for further clarification as to the source of payment and the source of the loan and how the payments should be made. Hello?
I'm with you. All right, then, very well. We're really out of time and we have to start wrapping up now. Ben, let me come back to you for your last comment on this issue before we go. What would you want to see? I mean, just moving forward. Ben, if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. So
can you come again?
Yes, well, we're wrapping up now. What would be your last comments before we go?
Okay, my last comment is this: before we go borrowing, we should look at how much we are owing, because currently, right now, our debt profile stands about $64 billion. And what are we borrowing for? Do we need the money, like the last speaker said? Yes, we need the money. Every government needs money to run its daily activity. And currently, we have a huge gap of infrastructural deficit in the country. But at the same time, when we look at the money that has been borrowed in the past, what have those money been used for? Or I mean, currently we can't see anything tangible. Anything tangible that we can say, look, we can hold on to and say the money that has been borrowed from the past, this is what we have done with it. But all I can advise the government is before they want to borrow, before they go out to borrow any money, they should be able to come out and tell Nigerians what they will use this money for and how are we going to pay back this money. Because once you owe anybody, you become a slave to them. When we are owing all these countries, we become a slave to them. They begin to have some kind of say in our own policy. We can't drive our own economy the way we want. They will always have something to say because we are owing them. And we can't say much. They dictate to us what to do and what not to do, and we'll continue to suffer from this kind of problems if we don't pay them back, because definitely we are owing them. But I think the government should go back and the government should go back again and reconsider. Think very well. Some of the projects that they have outlined that they want to do with this money is something that if you go to other part of the country, is something that the private sector can embark upon. The Lagos-Ibadan expressway has been there. If the private sector should handle that job, handle that road, they will build it and set up a tool. They can collect this money for the next 20 years, and they will also be saddled with the responsibility of maintaining that same road. So we have a good road. Other parts of this country can have good roads. Allow the private sectors to invest in our infrastructural gaps, our roads, in the railway sectors. They will take this money, they will build it, set up tools. All the government will do is to provide an enabling environment for them to operate, create laws that will help these companies that will come, and also give them that benefit of that when they invest, that they will get the return of that investment. That's all what an investor wants to know. How sincere are you that if I put my money here, I will get it back? And these things will work for us. If it's working in other countries, it can work in Nigeria. I see no reason why it will not work with our population. I mean, we shouldn't be talking about all these things here, and then we should be talking of how we can move forward and do better things, and not still going back every year, same story, every year, same story, same thing. We are just tired of all this old thing. All we just need to do is create a very good environment for these guys to work. The big guys are there who have the money to put upon, but the problem is when they put their money, how sure are they that they will get the return of their investment without any kind of political or government interference in the business that they have invested in?
Thank you very much, Ben Cosmos, who joined us from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Henry, let me also come to you and get your own comments just before we go.
Okay, thank you. We talked about two major things, the proposed $30 billion loan, as well as attempts by the government to diversify. And in both areas, there's serious need for improvement. The government needs to tell us, first, they need to get their house in order in terms of finances, in terms of public disclosure of utilization of government funds. There has been a steady decline of transparency on the part of this government that needs to be worked upon. And we need a clear and comprehensive plan on getting Nigeria out of the recession, backed by a plan to reduce the size of the government and get the private sector into the economy as they should. And the discussion on getting Nigeria out of recession cannot be complete without talking about fiscal federalism and devolution of power, because Nigeria is too big and too complex a country for its economy or for its governance to be run strictly from Abuja. We need a system that minimizes the power of the federal government and strengthens the states and incentivizes them to be the primary drivers of economic change in Nigeria, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of construction of ports, in terms of, stimulating business activity, tax reform. There are many things that should be driven from the state government that are currently in the hands of the federal government due to the exclusive list of the Constitution. We need to start having the conversation from there, and then we will drive the conversation about devolution of powers and restructuring. Then it moves to the economic issues that affect the common man, and we can have a discussion moving forward. But as at now, we are not. It's like we're building on a faulty foundation at this point in time. We need to fix the foundation, and then Nigeria can make progress after that.
All right. Hopefully, Nigeria will build the foundation you're talking about and make progress, and perhaps get Nigerians to the El Dorado that they, of course, want to see. But just before we go, also, Yoris, let's get your own thoughts. Lastly, before we wrap up this conversation.
Well, I clearly support what Mr. Henry said. There's a need for the government to get its house in order physical-wise, and the notion of this loan, it is more and more difficult. It is even more difficult for us to obtain this loan because the confidence level in our government is low compared to that of more advanced economies. So there's a need for the government to reevaluate and reassess their option as to how to get us out of this recession, and to improve its channels of public disclosure as to what and how it intends to source this much needed fund to push up the economic activities in the country.
All right, very well. Then I'm with you, Oyes. Thank you very much. Oyes, you join us from Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory, that's Abuja. Henry Nosegbe, you join us from Paris. Thank you as well. And Ben Cosmos, you also join us from Kuala Lumpur, that's in Malaysia. Thanks once again, all of you, for coming on board and sharing your thoughts on this issue. Thank you very much. And we also see those of you watching via our YouTube stream. We'll say a big thank you to all of you. And we also do see your comments. We're out of time. Would have taken a few of them, but then perhaps we'll do that another time. It's a Google Plus Hangout for Channels Beam, and I'm Victor Matthias.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sure.